he just went low. He's in his hand. He's in his hand. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mario Man 100 back again with another episode of How's My Team. We're actually recording the start of this video pretty early. This is actually Friday afternoon. It's just touched over 12, a couple of minutes after 12. But new episode of How's My Team. Obviously, we've got to talk about the Wanderers, both the women going up against Perth Glory away from home, and also the men as well, away from home against Melbourne Victory. And we also got to talk about Liverpool, because they only play once this week, but they do play a big game, top four clash against Arsenal, the ladder leaders of the Premier League, and probably a few things in between that we're going to talk about. But let's start with the episode. So that's actually where I'll start the episode, is actually with Liverpool, because obviously they actually, in terms of everybody playing, actually plays first. So they played against Arsenal this morning at 7 a.m. my time on Friday. Obviously, like I said, it's a few hours after that on Friday now. And it was a 0-0 draw to Arsenal and Liverpool. Liverpool playing away from home, playing at Emirates. Only the second side that hasn't lost at the Emirates against Arsenal this season in terms of the Premier League. So that's a great stat to have. But Arsenal dropped points. Obviously some people will say Liverpool also dropped points, but compared to how people have been with Arsenal and saying Arsenal are going to win the league and all this type of stuff, Arsenal dropping points is not great. Though in saying that, other teams also did drop points this week, because all the games have actually been playing, have already played. I'm guessing it's probably because of FA Cup action coming up pretty soon. And we'll talk about that in a second. But it was a 0-0 draw. I think the only thing notable to really talk about was that, a couple of things notable to talk about, is especially the second half. Liverpool played a lot better. I think towards halftime, I think it ended up being, we had like 44% possession to that point. I think it did flip, and we did actually have the better result of the possession, 52.3. So we actually gained, I think, almost 8% in the second half over Arsenal, 47.7% for Arsenal. I think we had more shots on goal. They had more shots on target, but we had a few chances, few blocked. Obviously, one that come off the woodwork in the first half as well, which wasn't ideal, but it definitely shaped up to be like a top four clash, and it definitely kind of delivered. Obviously not in terms of the goal scoring, because obviously it was 0-0, but the way that both teams were playing, I do have the window open, so if you're getting some noise coming through, I apologise. It is a very hot day today. It's well over in the high 30s in terms of degrees Celsius, so if you want to convert that into Fahrenheit, I think you're looking at like 110, 120 Fahrenheit, if not more. So yeah, very hot, and it's supposed to be hotter tomorrow. I think it's supposed to be a top of 41 here, degrees Celsius. So we're definitely going into into the low, probably high hundreds, maybe low 110s, maybe even close to 120 tomorrow. So that's going to be very, very hot. So I've got the window open a little bit just to try and see if breeze might come in, because my bedroom especially is very hot. I was going to record some other stuff today, then got a little bit sidetracked, and also it was very, very warm in there. So especially with that, kind of want to turn some of the fans off in there while I'm recording, so it'll be even hotter in there. But we'll get to that. Obviously, we'll talk about that later. But Arsenal still got a 6-point lead over second place, which is Manchester City. Manchester City on 43 points right now. Aston Villa also on 43 points. I think all the top 4 sides actually drew. I think because Arsenal and Liverpool obviously played against each other. Manchester City, obviously that gap didn't close in, so they didn't actually win, and obviously didn't drop more points, so they didn't lose either. In fact, actually, yes, Manchester City did draw, but I forget who it was with. And then Aston Villa obviously must have drew as well. So they're in third place. Fourth place is still Liverpool, 2 points ahead of Brentford. Brentford have jumped into fifth position, as well as Newcastle also jumping into sixth position on 32 points, which means that Manchester United drops down to seventh position, also on 32 points. Just Newcastle has 1 goal better in terms of their goal difference. It's +5 compared to +4. Chelsea dropped to 8th position with 31 points. Fulham jumped to 9th, also on 31 points. Just obviously goal difference there. Chelsea have +10, and Fulham are a straight flat 0. So, yeah, pretty big margin in terms of goal difference there. Sunderland dropped down to 10th position with 30 points. Not ideal, obviously, for them, considering a few weeks ago they were up in the top 5. But obviously it's so close, going from 5th position, which is 33 points, right down to Bournemouth, which is 26. So you're looking at that's 7 points difference between 5th position and 15th position. So, not that much in terms of points. So any wins and any draws and any teams dropping points anywhere will considerably change the middle order of that table, even in going into obviously the 5th position, which obviously is Europa League qualification position as well. So that gap isn't going to increase. Probably the top 4, obviously it's a 2-point gap between 4th and 5th, obviously Liverpool and Brentford at the moment. It's 2 points between. But realistically, it's a 8-point jump between 3rd and 4th position. So even if Liverpool drop more points, it's going to get really congested in the middle. Sunderland in 10th position with 30. Then Brighton also drop to 11th position, still on 29 points. Everton stay at 12th position, also on 29. Crystal Palace jump to 13th position with 28 points. Which means that Tottenham Hotspur dropped to 14th position with 27. Bournemouth in 15th position with 26. Then it kind of drops 2 points to Leeds with 16, in 16th position with 22 points. Nottingham Forest 21 points in 17th position. 7 points ahead of the relegation zone to 18th, which is West Ham with 14. 19th position is Burnley with 13, and Wolves still making moves because they've also got another draw, so they're actually up to 7 points now, despite still being on the bottom of the ladder. But they're 6 points away from the next position up in terms of the relegation zone. So they're actually doing well the last few weeks, and I think that they've kind of turned things around a little bit. And hopefully for them, they do actually get into a position where they're actually fighting to try and get to the top of the relegation zone, if not try and get out, because obviously Nottingham Forest did win over West Ham, so that kind of flipped a few points there, because obviously West Ham missed out on points, or at least a point, to get close to Nottingham Forest, but also Nottingham Forest ended up getting a +3 point gain to get out of the relegation zone. So instead of being 4 points out of the relegation zone, West Ham are now 7 points behind. So it's big result there in terms of the bottom of the ladder, but hopefully with Wolverhampton they can fight, because the last couple of weeks they've done really well in terms of getting a few draws. Obviously one against Manchester United, obviously winning over West Ham as well. It's been been a good couple of weeks for them. Obviously still in the relegation zone, but obviously getting a win or draws and getting points on the board, considering that you had 2 points for a while and didn't have any points for like the first few weeks of the season. Having 7 points at this point, yes, 21 weeks in, obviously in terms of playing, and only having 7 points for it, that means it's like a point every 3 games, but on average. But at the same time, you know, they could be worse off than they were, because they had 2 points not that long ago. So, you know, they've done pretty well for themselves. But obviously Liverpool being in 4th position, not a bad situation there. And obviously 0-0 draw with Arsenal, which also ultimately is another good result for Liverpool. I think it actually benefits Liverpool more than it does Arsenal. Because Arsenal then, you know, have dropped points. They lose their little bit of their margin a little bit, I guess, because they could have added more points to it. You know, and Liverpool obviously could have lost that extra point and would only been a point out of dropping out of the top 4. But also, notable thing to talk about was late in the game, Conor Bradley looks like he got an injury, because he actually did get stretchered off. I don't know whether that was a precaution or not. We don't know the extent of his injury at the moment, I don't think. He's still going to get assessed and all that type of stuff, but, you know, it's unfortunate for him. Obviously he had to get subbed off very late. We're talking like, I think, well into stoppage time in the second half when that occurred. So it's only just before the game finished, which wasn't great in terms of results. For that, in terms of player welfare, but hopefully he gets a lot better, and hopefully it's not too serious. But we should know. I should know by possibly by the end of the week when this video goes up, or possibly next week. And speaking on obviously Liverpool, I guess a lot of the games, because a lot of the games had already finished by Friday, by today. I think possibly that's because of FA Cup like games coming up, because we do have the round 3 clash for the FA Cup against Barnsley at home at Anfield on Tuesday my time, so 6:45 in the morning for me. So it's just a little bit before what this game was this morning for Arsenal. So that'll be game on Tuesday. So probably around when this episode actually goes up my time, which is usually around 10 on a Tuesday, and obviously usually be up on a Monday for America. This game should actually be almost close to finished, if not actually finished. So Liverpool against Barnsley in the FA Cup, and then later on that week on the Sunday, we have Burnley at home as well, 2 a.m. my time on Sunday. So hopefully it'll be 2 wins, especially against Burnley, because obviously Burnley second last at this point, and not looking ideal. And hopefully Liverpool can gain some points. Obviously, if Liverpool want to go through further to the FA Cup, I'd love them to continue on in that as well, because after that, the rest of the month is pretty fierce, because we've got 2 games in Champions League and 1 game against Bournemouth in the Premier League, and then obviously Bournemouth, yes, in 15th position, but are still a good side at this point. So obviously we got in Champions League, we got Marseille away from home on the Thursday after, the 22nd of January, and then we play Karabag the week after at home on the 29th. And obviously with Champions League, because obviously we haven't played Champions League so far this year, it's only been a few days into the year. Obviously at this point Liverpool are in 9th position, so obviously they're fighting for a top 8 spot. Martial probably would be too, with a win. They've got 12 points, they'd jump in, they'd almost jump pretty much everybody. You'd have to think that Atletico Madrid, you'd have to hope, would lose for them, for Martial to get into the top 8 with the game to go. And Atletico Madrid, have the name of the team that I can't pronounce in the Champions League that I've done quite a few times over this video over this video series. They play them, and then obviously Karabag are in 22nd position, and they're playing Eintracht Frankfurt this upcoming game. So they're also on, how many points was it? 7. So yeah, so if they lose against Liverpool, they're probably out. They would be out of a top 8 qualification, Karabag. They would be in a situation where they'd be playing in playoffs unless they lose both of their next 2 games. Because if they lose, I think they're on 9 points. I think they're on 7 points right now. 7 points right now. And obviously, there's a few teams in the bottom that are looking to get into that playoff qualification situation. Beneficia is one of them. Eintracht would be another one. There's a few teams down there that would like to go into that position. So if they don't get any points, it will hamper them in the long run. But yeah, we'll see what happens when it comes to qualification for Champions League and like playoff qualification or going into the last 16. We'll see what happens with that, because obviously those results will be confirmed in the next couple of weeks. But obviously we'll talk about that when we get to that, because obviously we've got a week in between. We've got FA Cup matches coming up this week coming, so we'll see how we go. But 0-0 draw against Arsenal for Liverpool. Not a bad result for Liverpool. Probably a worse result for Arsenal. But, still a good result as a top 4 clash. Just wish there was probably goals in it. But, what can you do? And now we'll talk about the Wanderers women. Excuse the lighting and excuse my hair. I just had a shower not too long ago. And it is Monday night or Monday afternoon / close to Monday at sunset. Just because I haven't had time to actually record the rest of this episode. I was away yesterday, all of yesterday. I went out to watch the cricket and watched like about 5 hours of the cricket before I got completely round out, and the match was abandoned eventually, so I had plenty of time to travel, and also kind of slept in yesterday as well. I was up pretty late on Saturday night playing games with my best friend Jordan. And then obviously slept in a little bit on Sunday, and then did a little bit of the same today, but obviously was working today, so trying to catch up on the episode, and obviously we'll get into the rest of the results, but we'll talk about the Wanderers women first, because they did play first. They played on Friday. They played late because they obviously played in the West, so they played at 10 p.m. my time, which would have been 7 p.m. Western Australian time, and it was up against Perth Glory away from home, and it was a 3-1 loss away, which doesn't help the Wanderers in any form or fashion, especially after obviously the point that they gained last week with Canberra United. Like the game previously, obviously they played relatively well, and they kind of turned things around, and I think the effort wasn't 100% there for this game. The second half was a little bit better than the first half, I will say, for the women, because they kept the score to 1 apiece in the second half. So this Perth Glory scored in the 29th minute and the 44th minute. Then the Wanderers got one back in the 75th minute, and then obviously Perth Glory kicked the sealer in terms of sealing goal for the 3-1 win in the 84th minute. So so they're playing relatively good football, Perth Glory. There's technically one game left in the competition. Obviously they play tomorrow, but that's actually a catch-up game for Sydney FC and the Jets. That'll be 7 p.m. tomorrow, but that's just a catch-up game from previously. So looking at the table in terms of the women are still on the bottom. So the Wanderers are still on the bottom in 11th position. But we have had a few places switch positions. So, and first is now Melbourne City over Canberra United. So Melbourne City with 19 points in first position. Canberra United, like I said, dropped to second position. They're on 18 points. They had the bye this week, so they didn't get any points, and obviously losing points from the Wanderers game as well didn't really help them in trying to fight for that top spot, that minor premiership spot for them. Third position is Central Coast Mariners with 17. Fourth position is Melbourne Victory with 16. I think Melbourne Victory had the bye last week, so they've been actually trying to catch up, and I think they actually, what was the result? Because I'm sure I have it here. I'm sure that didn't go great. Something happened. I'm sure something happened. I can't even remember. Let me have a look. Round 12. It was 1-0 loss to Brisbane Roar. So they did actually end up losing, so they lost points in that regard as well. Then fifth position is Perth Glory, obviously flying high after the win against the Wanderers, and +2 on their goal difference as well, with 15 points. Sixth position is Brisbane. They round out the top 6 with 13. Then Wellington in 7th position with 12. Adelaide United in 8th position on 11. Then it's Newcastle Jets and Sydney FC, all both on 10 points. Obviously Newcastle Jets in 9th position, Sydney FC in 10th position. Obviously they will play tomorrow. So they're the two teams that play tomorrow in terms of recording this. But when this goes up, the game probably would have been done already in terms of my time. So, excuse me, it's been a long day at work, so I'm a bit tired. And been trying to catch up on some sleep too. But yeah, so points still on the board for them. And then obviously the Wanderers on the bottom with 5 points to their name. Though they did get a goal, obviously, in the goals for, so they're now up to 8 goals for. But obviously with the conceding goals, it's 22 against the Wanderers women. So the defense needs to improve quite a bit, and hopefully we can get some clean sheets out of some of these games as well, because we need to really work on trying to get that goal difference back back under control, because it's not looking great. It's like it's 14 minus 14 for the team at the moment, but 3-1 loss, pretty disappointing, especially after what they went through previously with Canberra United and how well they played, playing against Perth Glory as they did. In some areas, obviously they were pretty lacking, especially in goal scoring, or shots on goal as well. Kind of disappointing in that. The Wanderers women play on Friday, the 16th. They play at 7 p.m. my time, and they play at home against Brisbane Roar. So it's 6th versus 11th, and hopefully they do well against Brisbane. Hopefully we can snag some points, even if it's just a point. Obviously would like the 3 points, but if they can snag a point out of it, I think that is a good result for them, and just trying to work back into the swing of things with gaining points again, because that gap between last and second last is gaining, because it's now 5 points going into obviously the game tomorrow when I'm recording this, for Newcastle and Sydney FC. Now obviously both of those teams are on 10 points, so if one does win, obviously one will stay on 10 points, but if they draw, they go up to 11, and that's the same points as Adelaide, which means there will be 6 points in front, which means there'll be 2 wins in front of 2 wins gap between second last and last position if they do draw together. So we're hoping it's not a draw. We're hoping it's a win one way or another. Hopefully it's Newcastle winning. Like Newcastle to win over Sydney FC, because Sydney FC getting in the danger mode, with possibly going to the bottom would be great, especially with the fact that they've only scored 5 goals all year. That definitely does help. Scoring 5 and conceding 12. Now, ultimately, yes, the Wanderers have conceded 22, which is not ideal for sure. But obviously have scored more goals than Sydney FC at this point in time. But 3-1 loss against Perth Glory away from home for the Wanderers, especially after the result that they had in Canberra United. Not great at all. On the other hand, let's talk about the Wanderers men, because they ended up playing in Melbourne against Melbourne Victory. Ended up being a 1-0 win for the Wanderers. They've snapped, I think it was a 5 or 6 game run where they hadn't actually got a win. But they finally got a win again. Obviously it was from a penalty kick in the 29th minute by Costa Barbarouses. And it was pretty hard slogging. I was watching pretty much most, if not all, this game, because I was at home on Saturday watching the game, and while it was very hot, like here it was 41 degrees Celsius, which I'm looking at probably 110, 120 degrees Fahrenheit, if not more than that. So definitely very, very scorching hot outside, so I was staying inside as much as possible. In fact, actually, I was pretty much inside almost the entire day on Saturday. So I was watching this game, and the Wanderers, like, their defense in some areas was scrappy. Ultimately, especially towards the late end of the second half, it was much more scrappy, especially in the second half. Like, I think in the middle of the second half, they actually didn't play too bad. But in terms of how the first half went, they played a little bit better in the first half. Obviously, they got the goal as well, but they put the pressure on pretty early on against Melbourne Victory away from home, and obviously come well with a penalty in the box. Costa obviously converting it into a goal. And ultimately, I think Victory didn't play at their best. They played pretty averagely, honestly, and a lot of the chances that they did have in the game, they squandered pretty much all of them. Obviously, considering we held them to 0. But I think when it comes to a lot of chances, there should have been some passes to other players for some of the shots that they ended up shooting at the goal that were nowhere near. Ultimately, they had the Wanderers on the back foot a decent amount, especially in the second half. And I don't know, for whatever reason, instead of playing a 1-2, like 1-2 pass, maybe a 1-2 pass into a third pass into somebody shooting for the goal, like it gets to 1 and they're trying to shoot from long range and nowhere near that would work. I don't know what Victory were doing. Ultimately, of course, towards the late end of the game, obviously they were a bit under pressure, so they were shooting for anything. But realistically, I feel like they were just rushing it a little bit, and they didn't play that well at all. The defense was decent, especially after conceding the goal that obviously won the game for the Wanderers. The defense actually picked up a little bit, though they were very scrappy. The Wanderers probably could have gone up by more, and were pretty unlucky to do so. I think they kind of squandered a couple of chances themselves, but not as much as Victory. Victory did definitely try to put a lot of shots on goal. Obviously, it was 14 shots to 9 for the Wanderers, 4 on target for the Wanderers, 5 outside. Whereas for Victory, it was 3 on target and 11 wide of target, including one from one Manor that actually did get headed away by the defender on the line. But yeah, they played well. Ultimately, I feel like with the Wanderers, obviously they didn't play their best game, but they could have played a lot better. And Victory could have played a lot better as well. But it's one of those situations where, away from home, taking a 1-0 win, very scrappy game, but ultimately you take those. You take those wins as much as you can get them because obviously, like I said, it'd been a while since we last won. And with the win, we actually jump off the bottom of the ladder. We do go to 11th, so we're in the same position as obviously the women's team is. Obviously with the competition in the men's being 12 teams, obviously, rather than 11, means that the Wanderers are off the bottom. Obviously with other results going their way as well. Obviously with Central Coast going down to Perth 3-0 away from home as well at HBF Park. So for the men's table, it goes as follows. Auckland FC on the top still on 24 points. Sydney FC in second with 22 points after a big win against MacArthur, who were in third position on 19. Then fourth position is Newcastle with 18. Newcastle with a decent win. No, did they play last week? Yeah, 1-0, sorry. Yeah. So a decent win in many regards. Then followed by Brisbane, also on 18 points in fifth position. Obviously just goal difference there. It's +1 for Newcastle. It's -1 for Brisbane. Then sixth position is Melbourne City with 17 points. Seventh position outside of the top six is Melbourne Victory, obviously with the loss for against the Wanderers. They're also on 17 points. It's just they're -1, obviously because of the 1-0 loss, whereas Melbourne City is +1. Then eighth position is Adelaide with 16 points. Ninth position is Perth Glory, also on 16 points. It's just the goal difference is -1 for both teams, but Adelaide has scored more. They've scored 18 goals compared to Perth's 15, so that's why Adelaide is above them on the table right now, even though they're on the same amount of points. 10th position is Wellington Phoenix on 15. Then the Wanderers, as I said, in 11th position, second last with 12. And Central Coast Mariners rounding out the table on the bottom in 12th position with 11 points. So a pretty good result for the Wanderers. They're still in last place in terms of scoring goals this year. They're up to 9 now, so they are close to getting to double digits. The next team above them is Brisbane with 11, and then Melbourne City is next up apart from that, which is with 12. So they need to obviously score more goals, but getting wins on the board is ultimately going to help. They play on Saturday this week, the Wanderers men's team, and they play against Newcastle Jets. So we're playing, so it's 11th playing 4th position. And it's going to be a very, very tough game. Ultimately, I think with Jets, even though the Wanderers are playing at CommBank, so they are playing at home, the Jets, you never know what you'll get with the Jets, because ultimately, Australian Cup champions this year, and have played relatively good football, but they've had games where they completely dropped off, and they've completely conceded like 4 or 5 goals. Which is not ideal for them, very inconsistent, but hopefully with that, we can get a win with that, even if it's just a draw. A draw would help a little bit, obviously with a point, but would rather, obviously, the 3 points, because obviously Mariners go up against MacArthur same day. They play at 6, so they've got 2 games basically going at the same time on Paramount Plus, with the Wanderers game going earlier at 5, and then obviously the Central Coast Mariners game at 6. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens. And then obviously the late game is the original rivalry, which is Adelaide versus Melbourne Victory, which is going to be very, very interesting as well. In terms of results, we'll see what happens. Obviously Melbourne City as well as Auckland to start the round as well, which is pretty cool. the champions from last year versus the premiers from last year. So that's going to be a very interesting game, especially considering it's in Melbourne. Because after that, the Wanderers play Perth. They play Perth at Combank, and then after that, on the 31st, it's the second edition of the Sydney Derby for the year. So I think it's 43. I think 43, 44, something like that. So it's going to be a very interesting couple of weeks coming up for the Wanderers in the lead up to that Sydney Derby game. So hopefully we can get some points on the board, because obviously Sydney FC are still in second position, still near the top of the table, and the Wanderers still near the bottom of the table. And obviously Sydney FC will look to rectify and avenge their loss from earlier in the year in the first Sydney Derby of the year in controversial fashion. We'll just say that much. But 1-0 win over Victory, fantastic result for the Wanderers. Another win, which is obviously great for them. Hopefully they can get the ball rolling with a couple of more wins on the board. If this is the circuit breaker for them, fantastic. I hope that it is, because if they play well, that helps a lot. If it doesn't, then obviously it's a little bit of false hope. But, here's hoping. Well, it's Tuesday morning and surprise update. I was going to film the last part of this video, the outro of this video, and talk about some miscellaneous stuff, obviously some NFL stuff. But we're just going to talk about it now. We're going to talk about the FA Cup, because obviously Liverpool were playing this morning, and I've delayed the video this much that I'm in a situation where I can talk about this game, because obviously the result has happened. And it was a 4-1 win over Barnsley FC for Liverpool. So they go through to the next round. They go to the fourth round of the FA Cup. 4-1. It was 2-1 at half time. In fact, actually, Barnsley did relatively well in the first half, obviously getting that goal back. It was off a Liverpool mistake. So obviously, congrats to them on getting a goal out of that. Because obviously, teams need to do that more to capitalise on a lot of errors from other teams that they're playing against. But obviously it was all for naught, because Barnsley do go out, obviously, in the third round. We do face Brighton in the fourth round at Anfield. So whenever that game happens, I'm assuming it'll be in the next month or two, in the next few weeks, Liverpool will go up against Brighton. And it'd be a 4-1 win, obviously, against Barnsley in the FA Cup. So obviously during the middle of the week, great for that. Obviously Dominic scored the 9th minute. Then we had obviously some different players playing today as well, because Jeremy Frimpong, it's how it's spelled. I don't know if that's phonetically on how it's said. He scored in the 36th minute. Then Adam Phillips for Barnsley scored in the 40th minute off a mistake from Liverpool. So it was 2-1 at half time. And then Florian Wirtz and Hugo ended up scoring. Florian in the 84th minute of a pass from Hugo. And then obviously Hugo got the pass back from Florian to score in the 4th minute of stoppage time before full time. So yeah, fantastic result for Liverpool. Obviously go through to the next round in the FA Cup. Obviously against Brighton, as I said. But I don't know exactly when that game is going to happen right now. Obviously Brighton, the next time we play Brighton in the Premier League is not until the 22nd of March. So just scrolling down just to see. So it could be in February. But we'll see what happens, because obviously we got Champions League football to worry about as well. So obviously this week coming up, obviously next episode, really only going to talk about one game, which is obviously against Burnley, which will be Sunday my time. So I'll talk about it on Monday, if not on Sunday. But I'll talk about it then, obviously. So we only have to talk about one game for Liverpool next week. Didn't expect I was going to talk about the FA Cup this week, but obviously the game was today. So might as well talk about it now. And a 4-1 win for Liverpool FC over Barnsley FC. So with that, that'll be the end of this episode of How's My Team. Sorry about the extension there, but obviously video got delayed quite a bit. so we can talk about the FA Cup. Not obviously, my intention wasn't to talk about the FA Cup this week, as I said in that portion. Wanted to probably record that next week to talk about, but we'll go over some miscellaneous stuff now. Obviously, my Seattle Seahawks were off this week. They had the first round bye. They were the number 1 seed in the NFC and the NFL. So we've got most of the playoff picture for the next round and the divisional round for next week sorted. The only game that hasn't played officially at this point in time is the Texans and the Steelers. So whoever plays that game will go up against the Patriots on the other side of the bracket, on the AFC side. But at the moment, the games that have played, the Bills won over the Jacksonville Jaguars in a close game. In fact, all the games this weekend were relatively close in terms of result, apart from the New England game against the Chargers as well. I think it was 19-3, I think, something like that. The result here, 16-3. So 13 points. So that's the only game that's blown out by more than a couple of points, like 3 or 4 points. LA won over the Carolina Panthers. San Francisco in a clutch win at the end of the game, won against Philadelphia. So they got a road win. And the Chicago Bears come from 17 points back at halftime to win by 4 points in the end of the game against the Green Bay Packers. So fantastic to my cousin, because he's a Bears supporter. He has been a Bears supporter for a long time. So ultimately we've gone through all the results so far. So far, in terms of the divisional round, that means that the Seattle Seahawks would be playing at home on Saturday against San Francisco, or Saturday, obviously US time, so it'd be Sunday my time. I'm not sure if it's Sunday morning or it'll be Sunday afternoon when that game is played. We don't know the times yet, because obviously all the games haven't finished yet. So we've got that game. We've also got LA playing in Chicago against the Bears. So that's going to be a fantastic game. I really think that in a situation, LA could really step up, but it could be a really, really close game in that game. And actually, that'll be probably a sleeper hit in terms of game of the round, apart from obviously San Francisco and Seattle, despite San Francisco being a bit beaten up in terms of offense and defense pretty much all season. But they're still there. They're still there in the playoffs, obviously. So, can't take any credit away from them. And then, obviously, the Buffalo Bills will travel to Denver to play the Broncos. The Broncos have had the week off as well, because they got the number 1 seed in the AFC, as obviously like the Seattle Seahawks did in the NFC. So they had the week break as well. And then, obviously, the winner of tonight's game, or this afternoon's game, in my case, in terms of the Texans and the Steelers, will go to New England to play the Patriots at Gillette Stadium. So that's going to be a very, very tough game for either of those teams to go through. I have a feeling the Texans will probably win. I think despite being away from home, they'll be playing in Pittsburgh against the Steelers. Obviously, the Steelers will want to step up, but the way that the Texans have been playing, and obviously their defense has been something that's been really solid for the last couple of seasons, barring maybe last season. They still kind of won the division last season, but they weren't playing anywhere near their best football last season. The Texans obviously could win that game pretty well, but again, it's away from home, and with the Steelers, you never know, because they seem to be winning, and seem to win at the weirdest times. When you don't expect that they're going to win, they win. When you expect that they're going to win, they lose. So it's like one of those things where you can't pick the Steelers on any given week, really, with the way that they're playing. But obviously, like I said, Seattle had the week off, so we're obviously playing at home, and have the potential to step into a home game for the NFC Championship game if we end up winning against the 49ers, which would be fantastic result for Seattle. If San Francisco win, it obviously will be either The NFC Championship game will obviously either be played in Chicago if Chicago wins against the Rams, or in LA against the Rams if the Rams win against the Bears. But that's only if San Francisco do win against Seattle. Possibility that could happen, but ultimately with George Kittle being injured this game against Philadelphia, possibly, maybe not. It just depends on who's playing, because we don't know. And obviously San Francisco, we just played them last week in the final round of the regular season. So obviously divisional, and it could be a potential double header for the division, in the fact that we played the San Francisco 49ers and we potentially could play the LA Rams in the NFC Championship game. So it could be the NFC West against the NFC West in the divisional round, and the NFC West against the NFC West in the NFC Championship game as well. So, but obviously not taking any credit away from the Bears, because I think the Bears are playing fantastic. There's a reason they were the 2 seed all year, despite dropping the position a couple of times, obviously gaining into the number 1 seed for a couple of weeks as well. But they're playing good footy, and obviously being down quite a bit against Green Bay at home, they turn things around really quickly. And I was watching some of that game. Obviously, when I was at the cricket, obviously I had the rain delay, like about halfway, like half an hour in, 45 minutes in to the game. So ended up watching parts of that game against for Green Bay and Chicago, because that was playing at the same time. And yeah, ultimately, Chicago came from behind and ended up winning the game. And credit to them, because it was tough going. But apart from that, obviously there's a few things going on. Obviously not in terms of my teams. Obviously Liverpool obviously go up against Burnley. Obviously we have the Jets going up against the Wanderers men's team, and then the women's team. I think we've got to travel as well. In fact, actually, let me have a look and confirm what the game is. Against Brisbane. Sorry. And they play at home. Play at home against Brisbane, and the Wanderers also play at home against the Jets. So pretty tough going for all the teams involved. Apart from that, I don't think there's really anything huge and notable to talk about right now. Obviously, the Giants still in pre-season. In fact, realistically, that pre-season started in December. If it was like most teams, they would, if not starting earlier. And then, there's nothing really going on with the Titans at the moment. But again, like I said, in the off-season right now, it'll start ramping up in the next couple of weeks. I think by the time we get to probably halfway through February, we'll start seeing stuff happening, because obviously opening round will start in March. We'll start in the first week of March. Obviously pre-season games for the NRL will also start around that February-March timeframe as well, before the season officially starts towards the end of March for the NRL, as well as obviously the AFL will start early March for that. So we'll be relatively soon when those 2 seasons start. So before I ramble even more, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Man 100. You guys have a great day night, and of course, take care.